One Thursday evening, I saw it. Tuesday morning, he'd reacted one way to something I'd said. Thursday evening, same thing I'd said, completely different reaction, same words, same tone. Same situation, different response. I didn't say anything, but something in me shifted. By Saturday, I couldn't unsee it. He wasn't reacting to what I did. He was deciding how to react. By Monday morning, the house felt different. Nothing in the relationship had changed. He was the same. I was the same. The house was the same. The routines were the same. But I'd seen something I couldn't unsee, and that seeing, that clarity, that moment of recognition changed everything. Not because anything was different, but because I finally understood what had always been there, and understanding it, seeing it clearly, made me dangerous, made me a threat, made me someone who knew too much, and he could sense it, could sense that I'd seen something. And the punishment for seeing was immediate, was cold, was designed to teach me that clarity itself was the crime. I spent 7 years in a relationship where perception was monitored, where seeing patterns was dangerous, where noticing inconsistencies made me the problem, and the Thursday evening I saw clearly the Thursday. I recognized that his reactions weren't reactions at all, but decisions, calculated responses designed to achieve specific outcomes, everything shifted not in the relationship, in me, in my understanding, in my ability to pretend I didn't see what I clearly saw. I'm 48, I left 2 years ago, and it took me 18 months to understand that the seeing wasn't the problem. The seeing was clarity, was accuracy, was me finally understanding the mechanism I'd been living in for 7 years, and his response to my seeing, his immediate withdrawal, his cold punishment for my clarity, that confirmed everything I'd seen, proved that the pattern I'd recognized was real, was intentional, was something he needed me not to see. I didn't say I saw it, but he knew I saw it. I thought seeing clearly would help us. I didn't expect it would end us. If you've ever noticed something you couldn't unnotice, if you've seen a pattern so clearly you couldn't pretend you hadn't seen it, if you've recognized that someone's responses weren't spontaneous but calculated, if you've realized that seeing itself became dangerous, that clarity made you a threat, you already know what I'm describing. You already know the isolation of seeing something clearly that you're not allowed to name, the loneliness of recognition without acknowledgement. And I'm realizing as I tell you this, some of you have seen it too, have recognized patterns you're not supposed to recognize, have clarity you're being punished for having. So here's what I need to know. What did you see that you couldn't unsee? Just drop it in the comments. I saw blank. Let's see if we're all seeing the same things, recognizing the same patterns, paying the same price for clarity. I spent 7 years thinking I was imagining things, reading too much into situations, being too analytical. I wasn't imagining anything. I was finally seeing clearly, and that clarity was the threat. Now let me tell you exactly what I saw. The Thursday evening, the pattern I recognized. The moment everything shifted. We'd been together 7 years, living together for 5, both in our early 40s when we met, both divorced. Both thought we knew ourselves well enough to recognize healthy relationship, to avoid repeating past mistakes. He seemed stable, seemed consistent, seemed like someone who responded naturally, authentically, whose emotions were genuine, whose reactions were honest. I didn't recognize that reactions could be performed. Year 3, I started noticing small inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could point to clearly. Just moments where his response seemed slightly off, slightly delayed, slightly calculated. I'd mention something and he'd react with concern. Days later, mention something similar, he'd react with irritation. Same type of thing, different reactions. I assumed it was mood. Assumed it was context. Assumed there were factors I wasn't seeing that explained the different responses. Year 4, the inconsistencies increased. I'd share good news, he'd seem happy. Different good news, similar situation, he'd seem annoyed. I'd need something, he'd be supportive. Different need, similar circumstance, he'd be cold. The variability confused me, made me anxious about sharing things, made me try to predict which response I'd get, what factors determined whether he'd be warm or cold, supportive or dismissive. I started testing it unconsciously. Would share something small, see how he responded. Would share something similar days later, compare the responses, trying to find the pattern, trying to understand what made him react one way versus another. The testing made me feel crazy, made me feel like I was the problem, like I was manufacturing inconsistency that didn't exist. Year 5, I mentioned to him that his reaction seemed unpredictable. Said I couldn't figure out what determined whether he'd be supportive or dismissive about the same type of thing. He said I was being oversensitive. Sighed I was reading into things. Said his reactions were normal responses to different situations, and I was trying to make them into some pattern that didn't exist. I believed him. Stopped testing. Stopped trying to find consistency. Accepted that I was the one creating problems by analyzing too much. Thursday evening, year 6, something happened that I couldn't explain away. Tuesday morning, I told him I needed to work late Wednesday. He'd seemed fine with it, supportive, said no problem, do what you need to do. Thursday evening, I mentioned I needed to work late Friday. Same type of thing, same reason, same amount of time. His response was completely different. He seemed irritated. Said I was always working late. Said I never prioritized our time together. Said he felt like work was more important to me than he was. I said, but Tuesday, you were fine with Wednesday. This is the same thing. He said it's not the same thing. I'm allowed to have different feelings about different situations. I said, but it's literally the same situation, same reason, same amount of time. What's different? He said, I don't have to explain my feelings to you. I feel how I feel. I sat there, replaying the two conversations. Tuesday, supportive. Thursday, irritated. Identical situation, completely different reactions. And something clicked. Something I've been seeing but not recognizing for 3 years. The variability wasn't mood, wasn't context, wasn't factors I wasn't seeing. The variability was the point. I didn't say anything, didn't argue, didn't push, just sat there processing what I'd finally seen clearly. His reactions weren't responses to what I did. They were decisions about how to respond, strategic decisions, calculated choices about which reaction would achieve which outcome. Keep me uncertain, keep me anxious, keep me trying to predict, keep me working to earn the supportive response instead of the dismissive one. The work trip was irrelevant. Tuesday, he'd chosen supportive. Thursday, he'd chosen irritated. Same situation, different choice. And the choice wasn't based on the situation. It was based on what he wanted to achieve by responding the way he responded. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay there replaying 3 years of interactions, seeing them differently. Seeing the pattern I'd been living in without recognizing it. The inconsistency wasn't accidental. It was designed. It was the mechanism. It kept me off balance, kept me trying, kept me focused on earning consistency instead of noticing that consistency was being deliberately withheld. Friday, I tested it, deliberately. Mentioned something I knew he'd been supportive about before. Got dismissive response. Mentioned something he'd been dismissive about before. Got supportive response. The responses had nothing to do with what I was saying. They were decisions he was making, calculated decisions about which response to give. I saw it clearly now, couldn't unsee it. Saturday, I started documenting it, not obviously, just mental notes. Tracking what I said, how he responded, comparing to previous similar situations. By Sunday evening, I had 10 examples. 10 instances where identical or nearly identical situations got completely different responses with no pattern based on the situation itself. Just variability, just unpredictability, just me never knowing which response I'd get. Monday morning, I woke up and the house felt different. He was the same, making coffee, reading news, acting normal. But I saw him differently, saw every response as a choice, every reaction as a decision, every emotion as calculated. Not spontaneous, not authentic, performed, strategic, designed to achieve specific outcomes. He noticed. I could see him noticing that I was different, that I was watching him differently, that something had shifted in me. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "You're acting strange." I said, "I'm fine." He said, "You've been weird since Thursday." I said, "I'm just tired." The lie was automatic, protective. I wasn't ready to say I saw it. Wasn't ready to name what I'd recognized. Knew somehow that naming it would be dangerous. That seeing it clearly was one thing. Speaking it was another. Week 2, I kept watching, kept documenting, kept seeing the pattern confirm itself over and over. His responses had nothing to do with what I did. Everything to do with what he wanted to achieve. If he wanted me anxious, he'd be inconsistent. If he wanted me trying harder, he'd withdraw. If he wanted me grateful, he'd be warm after being cold. Every response was strategic. Every reaction was calculated. I mentioned it to my therapist. Said I then noticed he responds to the same things differently, and I can't find any pattern based on the situation. Only pattern based on what the response achieves. She asked what the responses achieve. I said they keep me uncertain, keep me trying to figure out what will get the good response, keep me focused on managing his reactions. She said that's called intermittent reinforcement. I said, "What?" She said when responses are unpredictable, when you can't figure out what determines positive versus negative reaction, you work harder to get the positive one. You stay more focused on trying to earn it. It's more powerful than consistent reinforcement because you never know when you get the reward, so you keep trying. I'd been living in a system designed to keep me trying, and I'd finally seen it. Month 8, I tested my new understanding. Stopped trying to predict his responses. Stopped adjusting my behavior based on which response I might get. Just said what I needed to say. Did what I needed to do. Stopped playing the game of trying to earn the good response. His reactions became more extreme, more unpredictable, more designed to pull me back into trying. I didn't engage. Just watched, documented, saw the mechanism execute itself more desperately as I stopped responding to it. Month 9, he said I'd changed. Said I was distant. Said I didn't seem to care about his feelings anymore. I said, "I care about your feelings. I just don't understand them because they change based on factors I can't predict." He said that's normal. People have different responses to different things. I said, "But they're not different things. They're the same things. And your responses aren't based on the things. They're based on something else I can't identify." He looked at me differently after that. Like I'd said something threatening. Like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. The coldness started, not dramatic. Just steady withdrawal, distance, making it clear I'd crossed the line by noticing, by naming, by refusing to pretend that inconsistency was normal. Month 10, I realized the seeing itself was the threat. Not what I'd seen, but that I'd seen it. That I recognized the pattern. That I'd stopped pretending it didn't exist. The relationship couldn't function with me seeing clearly. Required me to be confused. Required me to be trying. Required me to be focused on earning consistency instead of recognizing that consistency was being deliberately withheld. That's when I understood my confusion wasn't a bug. It was the feature. Month 11, I told him I was leaving. He seemed shocked, said he didn't understand where this was coming from, said we hadn't even been fighting, said nothing was wrong. I said nothing is wrong, I just see things differently now, and seeing them differently has shown me this isn't sustainable. He said, "What do you see differently?" I said, "I see that your responses aren't responses, they're strategies." And I can't be in a relationship where emotional reactions are calculated instead of genuine. He said it was making him into something he wasn't. Said I was overanalyzing. Said I was destroying the relationship by reading into normal human variability. I said if the relationship falls apart because I finally see it clearly, then it was never built on my clarity. It was built on my confusion, and I'm not confused anymore. 2 years out, I trust my perceptions, trust my observations, trust my pattern recognition. Don't second guess what I clearly see. Don't explain away inconsistencies. Don't blame myself for noticing. The seeing was accurate. The seeing was clarity. The seeing was me finally understanding the system I'd been living in. And the punishment for seeing confirmed that the seeing was real. I'm learning that healthy relationships can tolerate perception, can handle being seen clearly, don't punish observation, don't require confusion, don't fall apart when you finally understand the patterns. The right person won't make your clarity dangerous, won't make your seeing a threat, won't require you to stay confused to stay safe. Here's what I desperately wish someone had told me the first time I noticed inconsistency and blamed myself for seeing it. If someone's responses are unpredictable, if identical situations get completely different reactions, if you can't find any pattern based on what you're doing, only pattern based on what their response achieves, you're not imagining things, you're not overanalyzing, you're not the problem. You're seeing clearly, and that seeing is accurate, and if seeing clearly makes you dangerous, if recognizing patterns makes you a threat, if clarity itself becomes punishable, you're not in a relationship that can tolerate truth. If you're reading this and you've seen something you can't unsee, if you've recognized patterns you're being punished for recognizing, if you've noticed that seeing clearly made you a threat, if you've realized that your confusion was required for the relationship to function, you're not crazy, you're not oversensitive, you're not overanalyzing. You're seeing accurately, and that accuracy is clarity, not problem. And you deserve a relationship that can tolerate being seen clearly, that doesn't require confusion, that doesn't punish your perception. If this resonated, if you've realized seeing clearly was treated as the crime, the next video is crucial. It's called I Didn't Argue. He withdrew. It's about what happens when you don't fight, don't yell, don't argue. Just calmly disagree or set a boundary or express a preference. And instead of engagement, instead of conversation, instead of discussion, you get withdrawal. Cold disappearance, emotional absence that teaches you that disagreeing itself is dangerous. That having different opinion carries consequences. That peace requires your agreement, your compliance, your constant alignment with what he wants. Link is on screen now.